What's up, family? Welcome back to the channel. It is getting chilly. Fall is here. That means winter is coming. Yikes. All right, so I have a really cool conversation that I want to have today, and I think I have like 7 pages of notes. So this may be a long one. To give you some context before I jump into my routine, so you can decide if you're going to stay for the whole thing. I came across an article yesterday, and the name of the article was The Global Rise of Atheism and Atheist Outnumbering Theist in the UK. And this article was done by Queen's University in Belfast in partnership with, do I have the other one up too? Yes, in partnership with the Brunel University of London, along with some other organizations as well. And they've also been a part of a 3-year project that's funded by the Templeton Foundation, called the Explaining Atheism Project, which I did spend some time, a little bit of time on their website, kind of seeing, who are these people and what is this work? Where do these numbers come from? And that's what we're going to jump in today. We're going to jump into these conversations, the data, the research that they've done, and why they believe that atheism is on a rise globally and that atheists apparently outnumber theists in the UK. Are y'all ready for this? I think it's going to be a lovely conversation. So as you're getting prepared, go ahead and get you a snack or drink or whatever you want, roll you want, you know what I'm saying? But make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell. Consider joining, supporting, or connecting with this community, channel, or content in any way that makes sense for you. And last but not least, check out the merch because it's dope as fuck. And we do have books. They're, everywhere books can be sold online. And you just look up our names and they'll pop up because our names are fairly unique. All right, so again, the name of the article that I came across, and I will do my best to try to remember to link it in the description. But the name of this article is The Global Rise of Atheism and Atheist Outnumbering Theist in the UK. And actually, just in case I forget to link the article, you can literally just type those words in Google and it's going to lead you to at least 3 different websites that have the exact same article. Because this was big news. I think they just presented the information this month. We're in October. Yep. They just presented it this month. So I felt really good about being able to see data that recent, even though the primacy of this data's focus is the UK. But we have quite a few supporters in the UK. Man, this would have been a good moment to show our map. And again, if you're watching wherever you're watching from, please let us know in the comments. We're putting together a map of where all of our supporters are so that as we build hubs of people within general places, we can start investing resources there to actually build community and do the work, because community is what community does, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's a low key Forrest Gump reference. All right, so let's jump into this because again, these are a lot of notes. All right, so there's been a significant increase in the number of individuals identifying as atheist or non-religious worldwide. Now, obviously, I've been saying this for some time, and I think one of the reasons why that was kind of like a moment for me is because for the past, not the past decade, because I've been an atheist for the past decade, but prior to that, I had spent 2+ decades in ministry on the other side. And we were not over there telling them, oh man, look how great we're winning. Those are not the conversations. It wasn't like, man, Christianity is spreading like wildfire. Those were never the conversations. And so, yes, while there are a lot of believers, I think this resistance to the idea that non-belief may be increasing is primarily due to confirmation biases and the availability heuristic type of situation. And that's why I do like to stick to the data. Because like I said, it could be my bias too, where like, again, as a pastor and a pastor who worked in fairly large churches, I can tell you by far and large, the majority of the members of those churches, or the majority of the people who came to those churches, lived a secular lifestyle. They just came to church on Sundays, sometimes, you know. All right, but this trend reflects changing attitudes toward religion, spirituality, and secularism in modern societies. As recent studies indicate that the UK has experienced a notable shift, with atheist or non religious individuals now outnumbering those who identify with the religion. This marks a historical change in the religious landscape of the country. Now, just to kind of give some of the statistical data, surveys shows that over 50% of the UK population now identifies as non-religious. This is a significant increase from previous decades where religious affiliation was more prevalent. Younger generations, specifically millennials and Generation Z, exhibit higher rates of non-religious identification compared to older generations. Factors including differing views on social issues, skepticism towards institutions, and secular upbringing. Um, and then there's the number of individuals identifying as Christian has decreased. Church attendance has also seen a significant decline over the years. And this is something that's actually true in the U.S. as well. Now, the difference between the U.S. and the U.K. is the U.S. does have more mega churches than the U.K. does. Now, the U.K. does have some. I think Matthew Ashimalawo is in the U.K., but the U.K. does have some for sure. But the U.S. like has a slew of mega churches, and they make it look like, at least to the outside world, man, that these churches are just out here thriving, and that's just not the case, because again, mega churches represent less than 5% of the actual of the church population in this country. And so 95% of them churches are struggling. Even the ones who still have big buildings, they're struggling, you know. Um, yeah, it's bad. But and while some minority religions have seen growth due to immigration and higher birth rate, the overall trend leans towards secularism. And this is according to this survey. Now, obviously, I'm not over there, so I don't know for sure. But even if I was over there, I'd still be looking for the data. Otherwise I'd be conforming or confining myself to my own availability heuristics. But no, I can see that because I know there, even in some of the countries there. I think Sweden is having an influx of immigration, of people who identify as Muslim, and they're wrestling with how they're going to identify with, or how they're going to wrestle with that now, which I think is a very interesting case study, because one of the common kind of tropes attached towards a popular secular society is that, oh no, if everybody becomes atheist, then the Muslims are going to take over, and that's kind of this. I hear that a lot, and it's just like, I don't think you understand what atheism is. Then, no, if atheism is on the increase, then those same people who rejected Christianity are going to reject Islam, unless, they're not atheists. That's a whole nother situation. Um, but no, and I'm not trying to say that to dismiss that concern, just saying to say, I think I think if society is becoming increasingly secular, and it's not just like a religious transition where this is a new trend for me to identify with, but people are becoming secular for human-centered reasons or people-centric reasons, then likely they're going to be resistant to anything that is going to be a threat to that. And yeah, and we see that happening, I think, in Sweden right now. They're like, nah, hold the fuck up. We just got rid of one of these, we're not about to do the other ones. Live here, be here, but we're not imposing these laws on our people. We're not doing that anymore. And it's an uncomfortable situation to be in, but that's literally the road ahead. And we'll talk about that more. But as societies become more modern and industrialized, religious influences tend to wane. And I did do a whole video on this one. Education, technological advancement, and scientific understanding reduce reliance on religious explanations. So and I think that really is a good point. And I think I did mention that in the video where I reviewed. I cannot remember the brother's name, but I reviewed his book on the subject. Um, but just the idea of you're no longer limited to your reliance on religious explanations. So even though there are people who still attach themselves to religious explanations for a myriad of things, when life really matters to them, they have something else they can lean on. So it's just like, there are quite a people who are part of the branches of Christianity that I was who didn't believe in taking medicine and stuff like that, for minor things. I'm not taking medicine for headache. God is my doctor. And sure, like, and I'm leaning on God for this religious explanation, this religious experience. But then when something becomes life threatening, they no longer have to rely on that religious experience, as opposed prior to the advent of modern medicine. In most cases, you just had to rely on the religious explanation. The further we removed ourselves from that reliance, the further the need for those explanations, or the further we removed ourselves from the need for those explanations. And so, yeah, there's also an emphasis on individualism and personal freedom, which leads people to question traditional beliefs. Yeah, because individualism is a mixed bag, right? You get a little bit of everything in it, and I think that's probably going to be the biggest challenge of redefining community, because community, in many ways, especially in religious communities, community became something that robbed you of identity. It became something that robbed you of your your self identity, your authenticity, your sense of agency and autonomy. And so that's something that I know community will have to be mindful of going forward when building secular community, is how do we build communities that still honor people's individualism, because what that individualism kind of helps people break away from or become averse to is groupthink, you know which ultimately groupthink is the foundation of traditional beliefs. But and then of course, there's been an increased access to information, which allows for exposure to diverse perspectives. The more information you are exposed to, the more information you have to wrestle with, and the more information you have to connect the dots. I have a little experiment that I'm doing with this about how thoughts form, and I always imagine it kind of like little, just tiny bytes or balls of data, moving around in a jar. And the more bytes of data you get in there, the more is moving around. And when one byte of data finds a point of identification, or a point of relativity, if you will, with another piece of data, it forms a connection, it forms a bond, and that process just continues. And some become entire large data structures, data nodes, and node structures. And that's just my way of kind of imagining how knowledge building works in the brain, or in the mind rather. But yeah, okay, I don't know why I went down that rabbit trail, but oh yeah, just because the increased access to information, the more information you have to wrestle with, the more points of relativity you have between those information. And you end up understanding things that you didn't quite understand before. And I know that was like a big thing for me. Was I know even as a minister in high school, I'd come up with the ideology that there are things that I may know to be true today that I may know to be false tomorrow. And so I started trying to live like that. And so I definitely became somewhat of a knowledge hustler after that. Like I wanted to know, like I need to know information, because I don't want to be wrong, you know, Mm. Not about important things. And then so also historical events such as scandals within religious institutions can erode public trust. And we've seen a lot of that in the U.S., right? And in policies promoting secular governance reinforce separation between religion and state. So Similar trends have been observed in other European countries like Sweden, which I mentioned earlier, Norway, and the Netherlands. And then Western Europe has generally become more secular compared to the other regions. While atheism is on the rise in some parts of the world, other regions, particularly in Africa and the Middle East, maintain strong religious adherence. Globalization and cultural exchange impact religious dynamics differently across societies. So now I wanted to pull, I'm not necessarily finished with that article, but that article is very much focused on the UK. So I did a little bit of research on my own. So, which some of this is some stuff I've highlighted in previous videos to bring in the comparison for the US, right? So for the US in 2007, according to Pew Research, the Pew Research Center, around 2007, around 16% of American adults identified as religiously unaffiliated. By 2021, this figure had risen to approximately 29%, nearly doubling over 14 years. Now, that is pretty significant. This is obviously the religious unaffiliated, is where you've heard this popular term, the nuns, NONES, which basically mean non believers, including atheists, agnostics, and those who describe their religion as nothing in particular. Atheists make up about 4% and agnostics of 5% of the US adult population. Millennials born 1981 to 1996 and Generation Z born 1997 through 2012, and that's really according to who you ask, are significantly more likely to be unaffiliated. I don't know if you know this or not. I am a millennial. I am. The secret is out. Um, and there's also an increased emphasis on personal autonomy and skepticism towards institutions. I can see that. A greater acceptance of secular values and scientific explanations. In the 1990s, about 90% of Americans identified as Christian. By 2021, this number had dropped to about 63%. So again, you're seeing that increase. You're seeing the dynamics of the increase and the decrease. Both Protestant and Catholic churches have seen membership and attendance decrease, and mainline Protestant churches have been particularly affected. And again, I was a part of the mainline Protestant branches, and I'm telling you, we've been feeling it. We were feeling it for a long time. And many Americans are leaving the religion in which they were raised, and the majority of those who leave do not join another faith tradition. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't um, remain religious in some way or superstitious in some way or attached to supernaturalism in some way. But a lot of them, you see, they typically move away from the idea of organized religion altogether. So even if some of those people who leave their religion still identify with some of the principles of their religion. And so, of course, factors contributing to the rise of atheism in the U.S. has been higher education levels. Education correlates with increased likelihood of questioning religious beliefs. And I do want to clarify, like when we're talking about when I'm talking about higher education levels, one of the nuances that I like to highlight there is that because this is just to help some people out there, because there are people out there who don't have degrees from university or whatever. You don't have concentrations and majors and minors and all of that. That doesn't speak to a lack of an education level. You know, um, educational norms have changed, thankfully. I've never been a fan of traditional education. You're probably never going to hear me on that bandwagon. Um, I don't have a lot of positive things to say about my educators. And I went to over 20 different schools in my life. So I've had a lot of them. Most of the people I know who have good things to say about their educators, it had nothing to do with the education, you know. And as someone who's intensely and insanely curious, I felt like public education ended up being an incredible waste of my time. And that's just me. And maybe I had high expectations, but like none of my science classes were actual science classes. And man, okay, that's gonna piss me off just even thinking about it. I'm back. I'm back. So, but the big point was that if you're learning, that's impacting your education level. You know, if you've attached yourself to any, to any subject of interest, that's impacting your education level. If you're reading books, hell, if you're just watching media on these things that are a part of your academic interest, you're impacting your education level. So while yes, I am an advocate for classical education as far as college, university, what may have you. I'm an advocate of that for a myriad of reasons. But I will fully acknowledge that that is not the only road to take, nor is it a necessary road to take. You know, if you can't afford to go to college, please don't use that as a reason not to keep learning. You know, because at the end of the day, you can be responsible for your knowledge attainment, and you'd be surprised at how much you can learn without a teacher. You'd be surprised at how much you can learn without a classroom, you know? But you have to sharpen your critical thinking skills, and you got to know how to do the work, do it right, do your best, and do the most. Okay, that's just my personal thing. All right. And of course, an obvious contributing factor is internet and social media. Provides platform for discussions. Hello. Debates. I'm not really a debate guy. And access to alternative viewpoints. You know, yeah, I don't really do debates. Yeah, I have thoughts there, which I think I've shared them, so no need to rehash. But other contributing factors, as far as the rise of atheism in the U.S., and I think this is a big one, are political and social issues. The association of certain religious groups with political agendas will typically alienate some people, which is why there are so many people who, when they deconstruct and deconvert from Christianity in this country, they also many of them also become disillusioned with the politics in this country as well. But then also disagreement with religious stances on issues like LGBTQ plus rights and gender equality. So the implications of the trend, especially for the U.S., is that we actually are moving towards secular ethics and values, and that we're moving towards a greater acceptance of diverse lifestyles and beliefs. And we're going to, and obviously my organization kind of, or our organization kind of exists for this reason: the rise of secular organizations providing community and charitable services, which is something I've been speaking about, sounding the alarm on. Yes, we need to be starting foster care systems. Yes, we need to be starting at risk facilities for youth. Yes, we need to be wrestling ways, building community to wrestle with the people who are housing challenged, for people who are dealing with financial crisis. Yes, we can vote and push good policies, but we can also work together as communities and do the same thing that other people who have thought something was important to them to do, unless it's not really important to us. Now, for me, these things are important. And so that's why I choose to build community. That's why I choose to promote community. That's why I choose to platform community. Because to me, community should be our operational strategy to get the better world we want. Hallelujah. All right, I'm back. I'm back. And so, just as far as some other trends that we can look out for is policy development, potential influence on policies related to education, healthcare, and human rights, increased advocacy for the separation of church and state. And of course, some churches are actually modernizing practices and focusing on inclusivity, which I've also talked about this in plenty of my videos. Engagement with social issues to remain irrelevant to younger demographics. You're seeing a lot of this. But like, and I like to highlight, like, folks, that's been the whole game. That's been the game of religion. In order for religion to remain relevant, in a progressive society, it has to progress. The only thing that protects religion from having to remain relevant is murder, which means when people can kill you over their religion, then the religion doesn't have to remain relevant. It just has to remain in power, you know. And that's happening in places on this country, on this planet that we all share. That's happening in places. There are places where people say something negative about the religion, they die. All right, so just to kind of give this little comparison, both the US and the UK are experiencing growth in the non religious populations. Young generations are leading the move away from organized religion in both countries. Yay, us. I still get to call myself youngish. Yeah, I'm youngish. There it is. Um, The US has traditionally been more religiously affiliated than the UK. So the shift represents a significant cultural change in the American context. The UK has a higher percentage of non religious individuals, and secularization began earlier. Now, obviously, the US is much larger than the UK. Those numbers can work towards our advantage or they can work towards the disadvantage. And I probably shouldn't phrase it advantage or disadvantage. Let me put it this way: those numbers could work to slow it or they could work to accelerate it. At this moment, it's anybody's game, right? To see how that goes. It will increase. Whether it increases fast or slow is anybody's game. But I'm pushing for fast. All right, so back to the original study, I just wanted to give that US comparison and that breakdown there. But if current trends persist, the non religious population in the US is likely to increase further. This could lead to significant cultural and societal shifts over time. Um, so, this is just, to me, I'm happy about it. Shift from religious-based ethics to secular moral philosophies and increased acceptance of diverse lifestyles and norms are the biggest social and cultural impact that the researchers found in their study, as well as the decline in traditional religious communities, leading to the emergence of alternative social networks. And again, of course, the rise of secular organizations and community groups, of which we are. There's also influence on laws and policies related to education, healthcare, and human rights. So we see where they have that alignment. We're seeing that. There was another word I was looking for. Symmetry. Yes, where we see some of that symmetry between the U.S. and the U.K. there of where this is of where this is impacting policy development in the education, healthcare, and human rights areas, but also a it's kind of very interesting because the more secular of a society we become, there is a more profound focus on religious freedom by necessity, and a sense of pluralism, and because there becomes a necessity to balance the freedom of religion with secular values, because secular values for the most part are humanistic values, and so you're not trying to ruin somebody else's life, you're just trying to make sure that they can't ruin anybody else's life, you know and so and of course, with the education system, you get a greater emphasis on secular education and critical thinking, which I believe is like we need this, y'all. We need this. Like, oh my goodness, we need this in this country. I don't know if you've seen, but we need this. A greater emphasis on secular education and critical thinking. Inclusion of religious studies as a cultural and historical subject rather than doctrinal teaching. And that's a big one as well, because even as you see, many people who deconvert still have a fascination or even an increased fascination in biblical literature or just religious literature at large. And that's absolutely wonderful. That means because many of these people are people who had no interest in any literature, you know, and the Bible through their deconversion ended up being something that has now transformed them into approaching it with a very scholarly approach. So, and I think we're just seeing the beginning of that. I think we're going to get some beautiful some beautiful stuff out of that. Like, I think we're going to get beautiful art out of it. I think we're going to get beautiful stories out of it. I think entire conferences are going to be coming out of this stuff. But that's the beauty of scholarship, man. And so I do love just the amount of people who've deconverted with superstition and fallen in love with scholarship, as far as literature and biblical literature. So that's just beautiful. I love that, and I think that's what happens. I'm not one of those people who says, "Oh, keep the Bible out of school." Nope, put it in there as long as it's treated like every other book that we have there, because actually I think that's going to help people a lot, a lot. Yep, as a cultural and historical subject. And then, and we're seeing this in the U.S. as well. Youth engagement, in the sense of there's a bigger drive for addressing the needs and perspectives of non-religious youth, which is also encouraging, or doing the work to encourage open dialogue about belief systems and values. And so we see this fight, and we see that there is a push towards doing this. Just because you see people pushing back, does like the only way pushback can exist is because people were pushing. And so don't stop pushing. When they push back harder. That's how this goes. It's like reverse tug of war, or inverse tug of war. Yeah. All right. So as far as the interpretations of the data or the analysis, some individuals, I love this one. They highlighted the role of cultural Christianity. Now, I thought I coined that phrase. Apparently, I did not. But then again, this did just come out this year. So they may have watched my interview with Ichabod, which was the first pre-recorded and first interview I did, period. It's not the first one that showed because it was pre-recorded, but it's the first interview I did, period. And that's where I shared my ideas on cultural Christianity. And that was in February, I believe. And so I got to figure out if these researchers found my stuff. You know, obviously they likely didn't. They used the term. It's a real easy term to come up with. But they did highlight the role of cultural Christianity. Some individuals may identify culturally with the religion despite lacking active belief or practice, which is something I've been calling out a lot. And pastors, we knew this. I think, oh man, yeah, believers, you knew this. If you were a believer, you've talked about those lukewarm believers, those people who were neither hot nor cold. And so God would spit them out. And it was like, why am I in God's mouth in the first place? Is anybody going to answer that question? Hello. Okay. So I'm back. Trends suggest that secularization will continue in the UK and similar societies. Potential for further decline in institutional religious participation is also expected. Religious movements are likely to adapt and find new ways to engage with contemporary audiences. Because I mean, that's always been the game: adapt or die. Evolve or die. That's funny for an institution to be historically against evolution. And then spiritual seeking may lead individuals towards alternative or non-traditional forms of spirituality. And I think that's a major thing that we've seen. And it's one of those undercurrents toward the move towards a more secular society. And one that doesn't get its credit, and for good reason, and that's the woo folk. Some of the woo folk are helping, like in major ways, push the zeitgeist towards secularism. And I'm not being facetious, because I heard it in my head and it was just like, yeah, they're helping all right, because we're like, those folk are crazy. But no, that's not where I was going with that. They're helping in the sense of, while yes, they may still hold some very supernatural beliefs, some of which may be outlandish, but by far and large, those people who have left because they're seeking some truth in their spirituality, they've also left this idea of institutional oppression. And they don't typically just see that in the church, they see it in governmental structures and business structures as well. So while while they may not meet the technical definition of being secular in the sense of still holding on to non-natural explanations, they are still absolutely advocates of a more secular society when it comes to government, politics, legislation, and the like. And I think the atheist community in particular needs to kind of recognize that in a way. Like, really, like, we need to stop making enemies where we don't have enemies at. And I think that's probably the best way I can say that. Stop making enemies where you don't have enemies at. And a part of that is just realizing that nobody's you. Everybody's on their own fucking journey. At one point, such were you, right? You know? And I know, like, I tell people, like, I stayed in the faith way longer than I should have, way longer than I should have. So I know I stayed in too long. So I know there's other people who are probably going to stay in longer than they should. You know, I'm not going to be the person rushing them out. If they find my channel, it won't be because I put it on their doorstep. It'll be because they came looking for it. Excuse me, I have been dealing with a little cough lately. All right, so let me wrap this up. The research indicates a significant shift towards atheism and non-religious identification in the UK, also reflecting broader global trends in secularization. Understanding these changes is crucial for policymakers, educators, religious institutions, and society at large to navigate the evolving cultural landscape. Continued exploration of this phenomenon will provide deeper insights into the interplay between religion, culture, and modernity. A few key points to remember is that atheists outnumber theists in the UK. Wow, right? Let's not everybody move at once, One of my heroes died in the UK. That was Marcus Garvey. Jamaica, US, UK. Didn't quite make it to Africa. Very interesting situation. Younger people are leading the move away from organized religions. Education, cultural shifts, skepticism towards institution, and increased access to information are factors that are influencing the rise of atheism. And implications are affecting social norms, policies, community structures, and educational systems. Some additional notes that I just kind of want to give you some questions to ponder on is think about how will the rise of atheism affect interfaith relationships? Will it cause more religions to reach across the aisle to each other to strengthen and shore up their support and try to make a comeback? Will it create more conversations between the religious and the secular community? Some people say sacred and secular, but I don't think that's a good distinction. So we'll just say religious. Or, here we go, the superstitious and the secular communities. What are the implications for religious education in schools? And how might religious institutions respond to declining membership? And when I use the terminology religious institutions, I could have said churches, but I didn't. The reason that I didn't say churches, because I want you to remember that because Christianity in particular is so pervasive in this country, religious institutions can also be your daycares. It can also be your school districts if the majority of those board members are believers, you know. And I don't say that in any type of conspiracy way. That's how social dynamics work, you know. Um, if, put it this way, if 80% of the attendees of a school, or the students of a school, and 80% of the faculty of a school, and 80% of the board of a school district are African American, black folk, we consider that a black school of a black school district. Let's remove the racial dynamic and replace it with a religious dynamic. If 80% of the students are perceived to be, 80 plus, are perceived to be Christians. 80% of the staff are perceived to be Christian, and 80% or above of the school boards are perceived to be Christians. Then, without trying to do anything underhanded, just simply being comfortable being around each other will make them more comfortable to treat it like it is a Christian school. And the majority of the schools that I've been a part of behaved as if they were religious schools. You know, it's very interesting, right? Like I had several teachers who preached in class. Like I had a I had an ISS teacher who used to prophesy to the students in his school suspension. Like he'd miraculously tell them why they were there before they got there. Like I don't know, an email probably. Hello, but so quite a few of our public universities in this country are damn near religious institutions. When last time you been to a commencement ceremony? I'm almost positive it opened up with a prayer and likely ended with one too. And somewhere during the speech, someone probably talked about the importance of God and probably went as far as to talk about how Jesus saved their life and if it wasn't for him. Yup. So when we think about religious institutions, the churches are not my biggest concern. You go to a church because you want to identify with that religion. I didn't go to college because I wanted to identify with that religion. When you drop your children off at daycare, you're not expecting them to be proselytizing your children. But I'm telling you, it's happening. It's happening. And I'm not trying to say that it's happening because these people are evil. These are just how social dynamics work. And these are the things that we're not as acquainted with as we should be. And that's often concerning to me because we're going to do the same things, right? If you're a secular person and you see a child who is struggling with being a part of a religious cult, you know, and you don't want to violate that child's safety by making it a bigger issue with their parents and stuff, you're going to become a safe space for that child. And if that child expresses to you that, hey, I'm not a believer, then you're likely going to feel comfortable expressing the same thing and advocating for that child. That's what those believers think they're doing, or that's what they see themselves as doing. If you're a person who loves the Lord Jesus and you believe that God sends people to hell, even kids, then at that moment you see yourself as a hero. And there's nothing about the social dynamics that prevents you from doing so because the perception is assumed religiosity, you know. And again, this is why I say the biggest answer is building communities. We can fight battles, but we're going to be fight until we make it safe for more people to identify. It's going to, in the era of presumed religion or of assumed religiosity, is going to continue to persist, even when the numbers have changed significantly. Because even though those numbers have changed, there's no way for you to see it. There's no visibility. And I'm not saying there's zero visibility. Again, there are wonderful organizations out here doing the work. But how many churches are there? How many daycares? Remember those foster care systems? Christian institutions, many of them. At-risk centers, Christian institutions, many of them. Remember the Shawshank Redemption movie? They showed that even some prisons are Christian institutions. Damn, like that's stuff you got to think about when you think about people who go up for parole and someone discovers that instead of becoming a jailbird Christian, they became a jailbird atheist. And if the people on their parole board are believers and know that this person is an atheist, And these people have presumptions about the morality of atheists. See, this is why you have to build community. You don't even know what's happening unless there's enough of you together talking about what we're facing to start determining what we can collectively work on together. All right, that's my community spiel. I was snuck it in here somehow. I'm always going to talk about community. That's who I am. But thank y'all for hanging out with me. I've got to get off because I've got to drink something and I've got to get to work in 10 minutes. But thank y'all for hanging out with me. I always enjoy these. Please let me know what you think, what you thought about this article and this review. And I did drop some questions in there for you to ponder. And I'll do my best to try to remember to drop the article in the link in the description. If I don't, again, all you have to do is Google, what is it? Global Rise of Atheism. Yep, the Global Rise of Atheism and Atheist Outnumbering Theist in the UK. And again, that is with Queen's University, Belfast. And that is also Brunel College, Brunel University of London. And so check those out, see what you think. It's kind of optimistic news. I know many of you are, or not many of you, but some of you are more on the defeatism side. I don't consider myself an optimist or a pessimist. I'm a realist. And right now, the data gives me reason. The data and my own determination gives me reason to think that we're going to definitely continue trending this way. And then some people will say, well, what if this happens? Then we will fight that and continue to move forward, because that's how we got here. We didn't get here by sitting on our asses. We got here for fighting for human rights, and so you continue to do so. All right, that's all I got. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell. Consider supporting, connecting, or joining this community channel or content in any way that makes sense for you and your pockets. And then, of course, check out the merch because it's dope as fuck. And we have books on Amazon. Type in our names, you will find them. And I love y'all. Until next time, keep rising, stay progressive, and if you can, only if you can, stay beautiful. I'll holla.